The rain poured down as if it wanted to drown the entire world. Scarlett Donovan sat in the rental car, her hands clutching the steering wheel, her vision blurred by both the downpour and the tears she fought to hold back. The symphony music from the engagement party still echoed in her head, tangled with her father's cold voice. "You will marry James." "This isn't a request, Scarlett. It's an order." She had run. Right in the middle of the lavish engagement party at the Plaza Hotel, where chandeliers sparkled and the clinking of wine glasses formed a symphony of power. Scarlett, dressed in a white silk gown worth more than a car, had slipped out the back door without looking back. She took nothing but her phone, a bit of cash, and a heart breaking apart at the seams. Now driving through the back roads of Maine, she had no idea where she was going. The GPS had died over an hour ago, leaving behind only scrambled lines on the screen. The rain blurred everything in sight, and Scarlett felt like a ship lost at sea. A bitter laugh escaped her lips. The heir to the Donovan financial empire, raised to be the picture of perfection, was now fleeing like a criminal. She thought about James, the fiancé her father had chosen. He wasn't a bad man, just empty. His smile was like a business deal, polite, proper, and utterly devoid of warmth. Scarlett had tried to love him, tried to believe that this marriage would bring happiness. But every time she looked into James's eyes, all she saw was herself trapped in a gilded cage where every dream was slowly strangled. A faint light flickered in the distance. Scarlett squinted, heart pounding. A large iron gate appeared through the rain, leading to a gravel driveway. She vaguely remembered booking a small inn online before everything spiraled out of control. This must be it, she told herself, though she wasn't sure. She drove through the gate, the tires crunching on gravel, and in front of her stood an old unlit mansion, looming like a ghost among the trees. Scarlett stopped the car and turned off the engine. The storm roared outside, making her hesitate. She looked up at the towering windows and moss-covered stone walls. It didn't look like an inn. It looked forgotten, but she had no other choice. Her clothes were soaked, her heels were now a burden, and the cold had seeped into her bones. She needed shelter, at least for tonight. She stepped out into the rain, the wind slapping her face like punishment. Scarlett ran to the front door and knocked hard. No response. She knocked again, this time nearly pounding, but only the rain answered. "Is no one here?" She tried the heavy wooden door, and to her surprise, it creaked open with a long groan, like the house was exhaling. Inside was a wide, dim hallway filled with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Scarlett stepped in, her wet shoes leaving trails across the marble floor. "Hello," her voice echoed softly, swallowed by the darkness. No reply. She walked further, heart thudding. A small fire crackled in the living room fireplace, casting flickers of light on the antique paintings along the wall. She paused in front of a portrait of a woman with sad eyes that seemed to stare straight into her soul. Scarlett shivered, not from the cold. She felt as if she had trespassed into a place she didn't belong. "Just one night," she whispered to herself. "I'll leave in the morning." She peeled off her soaked dress and curled into an armchair by the fire. The flames crackled, offering a hint of warmth, but they couldn't touch the loneliness gripping her chest. She thought of her mother, who died when she was young. Her mother once told her, "Freedom is worth more than any diamond, Scarlett, but you have to be brave enough to claim it." Scarlett never understood those words until tonight, until she stood in this unfamiliar house, no longer the Donovan heiress, but simply a girl searching for herself. She closed her eyes, letting the fire's warmth surround her. But then, footsteps, slow, heavy, echoing from the staircase. Scarlett's eyes flew open. Her body froze. Out of the shadows emerged a tall figure, eyes sharp and cold, locked onto hers. "The Donovan heiress," came a low, ice-cold voice. "What are you doing in my house?" Scarlett felt the blood in her veins freeze. The man stood at the top of the stairs, his tall frame nearly swallowed by the darkness. Only his piercing eyes reflected the firelight from the hearth. His voice, deep, cold, yet strangely magnetic, made her shiver. He knew who she was, the Donovan heiress. How did he know? And more importantly, where was she? She shot to her feet, her soaked dress clinging to her skin, making her feel small and exposed. I, I'm sorry, she stammered, taking a step back. I didn't mean to trespass. I thought this was an inn. I'll leave right away. But as she turned, the howling wind outside the window made her freeze. The rain had turned into a full-blown storm, shrieking like it could rip the sky apart. Leave, the man echoed, stepping down one stair. The dim firelight cast shadows across his angular face, disheveled black hair, a faint scar cutting through his left eyebrow. But it was his eyes, deep, oceanic, brimming with secrets that held her. Where exactly do you think you're going in a storm like this? The roads are flooded, and a snowstorm's on its way. You'll freeze before you even reach the gate. Scarlett clenched her fists, trying to steady her voice. I don't need your help. I can take care of myself. But even she could hear the tremor in her words. She didn't know where she was. Her phone was dead. The cold was sinking into her bones. And this man, frightening as he was, might be her only option. He gave a crooked smile, devoid of warmth. Take care of yourself? A little heiress like you, fleeing your palace, thinking you can survive out there? He stepped down a few more stairs, now only a few feet away. Sit down, Miss Donovan, before I change my mind and let you figure it out on your own. Her name in his mouth sounded like an accusation. Scarlett wanted to fight back, to scream that she wasn't the delicate porcelain doll he imagined. But she was tired, drained after hours of driving and the emotional weight of the party she'd fled. She sank into the armchair, eyes locked on him. Who are you? And how do you know me? He stopped, leaning casually against the banister, as if debating whether to answer. Lucian Vale, he said simply. This is my home. And as for knowing you, who in New York doesn't know the Donovans? The media talks about you like you're the city's crown jewel. A flicker of anger rose in her. You don't know anything about me, she snapped. Don't pretend you understand just because you read some cheap articles. But deep down, unease crept in. Lucian Vale. The name stirred something, a vague memory she couldn't quite place. Lucian raised an eyebrow, seemingly surprised by her bite. He walked over to the fireplace and threw in another log, causing the flames to roar. Maybe I don't know you, he said, his tone slightly softer, though still laced with sarcasm. But I know people like you, raised in silk, then one day decide to rebel, only to realize you can't live without the glow of that golden cage. His words cut deep. Scarlett wanted to scream, to tell him about the prison her father had built, about the dreams suffocated behind her flawless smile. But instead she bit her lip and looked away. You have no right to judge me. Silence settled between them, just the crackle of fire and the wind rattling the windows. Lucian sat in the armchair opposite hers, far enough to maintain distance, but close enough that she could feel his presence. He studied her slowly, as if reading a book he wasn't sure he wanted to finish. Then tell me, he said at last, voice low, why are you here? A girl like you in a dress worth thousands, ending up in a place like this? What are you running from? Scarlett looked up and met his gaze. There was something in the way he asked, not idle curiosity, but a quiet sincerity, like he actually wanted to know. She hesitated. Should she tell the truth? Or keep hiding? But maybe because she was tired, or maybe because she was lonely. She let her guard drop. I didn't want to marry the man my father chose, she said, her voice soft but steady. I didn't want to live a life that was already written for me. I just wanted to be myself, even if it's only for once. Lucian didn't respond right away. He looked at her, his eyes gentler now, as if seeing something in her he hadn't expected. Freedom, he said quietly. You think it's that easy? Just run away and you'll have it? No, Scarlett replied, her eyes burning with determination. But at least I tried. Better than spending my life living a lie. Another pause, then Lucian gave a short laugh, dry but not cruel. You're braver than I thought, Miss Donovan. He stood, walking back toward the staircase. Get some rest. There's a guest room upstairs. If the storm clears by morning, you can leave. Scarlett watched him go, her heart racing with a feeling she couldn't name. Who was he? Why did he live alone in this shadowed mansion? And why, despite his cold demeanor, Did she feel an inexplicable connection, like fate had dragged her here for a reason? She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to shake the chill. But deep down she knew, tonight, in this forgotten house, something had begun. 3 days passed, yet the snowstorm showed no sign of ending. Lucien Vale's ancient mansion, with its frigid stone walls and endless corridors, had become Scarlett Donovan's entire world. She sat by the parlor window, watching snow bury the drive that led to the gate, her heart heavy. The freedom she had craved now felt like a hazy dream, imprisoned by the weather and by the presence of the enigmatic man who owned this house. Lucien was more elusive than she'd imagined. He appeared at the most unexpected moments, when she was leafing through a dusty book in the study, or when she lingered too long before the hallway portrait of that sorrow-eyed woman. He seldom spoke, yet every word felt razor-sharp, as if he could see straight through her. What unsettled Scarlett most was how much he already knew about her, beyond her name and the Donovan fortune. He even knew she'd once refused one of her father's major contracts to protect a small charity. "How do you know about that?" she'd asked, voice trembling. Lucien merely shrugged. "I have my ways." Today, with snow still falling hard, Scarlett decided to break the suffocating silence. She found Lucien in the kitchen, slicing vegetables with unnerving focus. The oil lamp above cast warm light across his angular features and the faint scar on his brow. Standing in the doorway, she hesitated, then spoke. "You live here alone, don't you? No staff, no phone, no internet. Don't you ever feel lonely?" The knife paused mid-stroke. He didn't turn, but she sensed tension in his shoulders. "Loneliness is a choice," he said, voice low. "There are worse things than being alone." He resumed chopping, as if her question were nothing more than a passing draft. Scarlett stepped into the kitchen and sat at the old wooden table. "Like what?" She pressed softly yet boldly. "Living in a house full of ghosts, or hiding from the outside world?" This time Lucien looked at her. His deep, unreadable eyes made her pulse flutter. "You speak as if you understand me," he replied, a faint, cool smile on his lips. "And what about you, Scarlett?" "Running from a marriage, from your entire world. What did you expect to find here? Freedom, or just another cage?" His words stabbed with surgical precision. Scarlett felt her cheeks warm, less from anger than from the way he'd pierced her deepest fear. She lowered her gaze, fiddling with a spoon. "I don't know," she admitted quietly. "I just know I can't keep living the way I was. I don't want to be my father's puppet, or anyone's." Silence draped the room, broken only by the knife tapping the cutting board and the muffled hiss of snow against the windows. Then Lucien did something unexpected. He set the knife down, wiped his hands on a towel, and sat opposite her. "When I was young," he began, voice deep and distant, "I thought I could change everything. I had dreams, someone I loved, an entire future. But life isn't a fairy tale. Sometimes you learn to live with what's left." Scarlett looked up, surprised by his openness. For the first time, she saw a crack in the wall he'd built around himself. "What happened?" she whispered. "To the one you loved?" Lucien's gaze held hers a moment, weighing. Then he stood, returned to the vegetables. "Dinner first," he said, voice cooling again. "You'll need strength in this cold." They ate in near silence, but the tension had softened. Over steaming potato soup, Scarlett discovered Lucien was a better cook than she'd guessed. When she praised the soup, he only shrugged, yet she caught a brief sparkle in his eyes, as if he wasn't used to compliments. Afterward, they settled by the fireplace. Scarlett hugged a wool blanket. Lucien held a book he never opened. She tried again. "You never answered my question," she said gently, "about the woman you loved." Lucien stared into the flames for a long time before speaking. "She was an artist," he murmured, grief threading through his tone. "She lived for music, for beauty. But the world isn't kind to spirits like hers. I couldn't protect her." His hand tightened around the book. "That's all you need to know." A stab of ache pulsed in Scarlett's chest, partly for his story, partly because she realized he too carried wounds. "I'm sorry," she said, meaning it, "but you can't live in the past forever. Not everyone will leave you." He turned toward her, eyes cutting yet vulnerable. "Easy word," he replied. not with sarcasm but quiet resignation. And you? Can you truly leave everything, family, status, money behind for a life where no one knows your name? She gave a sad smile. I'm trying, but I'm afraid I'm not strong enough. Her confession hovered between them. Lucian studied her so long, her heartbeat quickened. In his gaze, she sensed no pity, only understanding. A spark leapt between them then, not the hearth's glow, but something deeper, more perilous. When Lucian rose and said it was late, that she should get some sleep, Scarlett knew he was keeping his distance. Yet she also knew that whether he admitted it or not, he was drawn to her, not to the Donovan heiress, but to the real woman beneath, scarred and aching for freedom. That night she drifted to sleep with his eyes imprinted on her mind, and with a dawning realization that even if the storm cleared, she might not be ready to leave this place too soon. On the fifth day inside Lucian Vale's mansion, time seemed to stop for Scarlett. The blizzard still roared outside the windows, burying every path, but inside her, another storm was stirring, a storm of unnamed emotions that surged whenever Lucien was near. He kept his distance, yet their brief conversations, their fleeting glances, had begun to melt the icy walls they both had built. That morning Lucian had disappeared somewhere within the vast estate, leaving Scarlett alone in the grand living room. She sat near the fireplace, flipping through the pages of an old novel, but her mind wasn't in the book. She was thinking of him, of the way he had looked at her last night when she'd confessed her fears. There had been something in his eyes, not just understanding, but a pain he tried to hide. Scarlett wanted to know more, not out of curiosity, but because she felt a strange connection, as if fate had tied them together. She stood and wandered aimlessly through the cold corridors. This mansion, with its ancient paintings and dust-covered furniture, felt like a museum of forgotten memories. She paused in front of a pair of oak doors she hadn't noticed before. A faint sliver of light escaped from beneath them, along with the scent of old wood and candle wax. Intrigued, Scarlett pushed them open. Inside was a large room with towering windows draped in deep crimson velvet. Faint daylight filtered through, illuminating a grand piano in the center of the room. Its glossy surface was coated in a thin layer of dust, as if no one had touched it in years. Scarlett's heart began to race. She had studied piano since childhood, but stopped after her mother passed away. Music had always been an escape for her, but also a painful reminder of loss. She stepped closer, letting her fingers brush over the yellowed ivory keys. A familiar feeling rose within her, as if she were reconnecting with a part of herself long buried. She sat down, drew a deep breath, and began to play. Clair de Lune by Debussy filled the room, its soft, moonlit notes weaving a spell that erased the storm, the weight of the Donovan name, everything. Scarlett closed her eyes and let the melody carry her away. She didn't realize Lucian was standing in the doorway. When the music ended, she opened her eyes and gasped. He was there, still and silent, his dark eyes haunted like a man trapped in a nightmare. His usually unreadable face was now raw, with something she couldn't quite name. "Where did you get the right to play that piano?" he asked, voice low and raspy, like it had been pulled from the depths of memory. Scarlett stood up, her heart pounding. I'm sorry, I didn't know. I just saw it and—" She trailed off, realizing he wasn't truly angry. He was trembling, barely but unmistakably, and his eyes weren't on her. They were on the piano, like it was a ghost come to life. Lucian stepped forward, placing a hand on the piano lid, so gently as if he were touching a wound. "She used to play that piece," he murmured, barely audible. "Every night. She'd sit here, and just listening to her was enough to make me forget everything." A chill passed down Scarlett's spine. "She?" she asked softly, already guessing he meant the woman he had mentioned the night before. Lucian turned away as if unwilling to let her see his expression. "Isabel," he said. The name sliced through the air like a blade. "She was a pianist. She lived for music, for beauty. But the world never understood her. And then one day, she vanished. No note, no trace." Scarlett didn't know what to say. She could feel his pain in every word, like he was tearing open his chest just to speak. I'm sorry, she said, her voice trembling. I didn't know the piano meant so much to you. Lucian gave a short, dry laugh. It's not your fault. I never thought I'd hear that piece again. Not in this room. Not after all these years. He turned to look at her, and for the first time, Scarlett saw something vulnerable in his eyes. You play beautifully, Scarlett, as if you understand it, as if you understand what it carries. His praise made her cheeks flush, but she didn't let herself be swept away. What happened to Isabel? She asked gently but firmly. You said she disappeared. Is that why you live like this? As if you're hiding? Lucian's hands clenched. His gaze turned distant. I'm not hiding, he said, but the conviction in his voice had faded. I just don't want history to repeat itself. Isabel wasn't just someone I loved. She was the reason I believed the world could still be beautiful. When she vanished, that belief vanished too. Scarlett stepped closer, not touching him, but close enough for him to feel her presence. You can't keep living with ghosts, Lucian, she said, her voice soft but sure. I know the past can be heavy. I'm running from mine too, but if you don't let it go, it'll drag you under. Lucian looked at her for so long she thought her heart might stop. You speak like you know how to let go, he said quietly. But look at you, Scarlett. You fled New York, fled your father, but you're still carrying that cage in your mind. His words hit hard. He was right, and that hurt. But before she could respond, Lucian turned and walked out of the room. Don't play that piano again, he said without looking back. Not because I don't want you to, but because I don't know if I can bear it. Scarlett stood alone in the fading light, snow still falling beyond the frosted glass. She looked at the piano, and for the first time she realized this mansion wasn't just her shelter. It was a tomb of memories, a place where Lucian had buried his heart. And she, though she didn't want to admit it, was being drawn deeper into his story, deeper than she had ever imagined. On the 7th night inside Lucian Vale's mansion, Scarlett couldn't sleep. She lay on the couch in the guest room, the firelight dancing across the ceiling, but her mind was trapped in the piano room, in Lucian's raspy voice as he spoke of Isabel. She saw him in every corner of this house, in the worn books, the portrait of the woman, the dust-covered piano. And what scared her the most was that she wasn't just curious about him anymore. She was drawn to him, deeply, helplessly. She got up, wrapped a wool blanket around her shoulders, and stepped into the hallway. The blizzard had quieted, leaving behind only the occasional hiss of wind slipping through the window panes. She heard a faint sound from the living room, where the fire still crackled. Lucian sat there in the armchair, a glass of red wine in hand. The firelight highlighted the sharp lines of his face and the depth in his eyes. In front of him sat a bottle and another glass, as if he'd known she would come. Couldn't sleep? He asked, his voice low, without looking up. Scarlett hesitated, then sat in the chair across from him. You're not sleeping either, she replied, trying to sound steady despite her racing heart. She eyed the glass on the table. Is that for me? Lucian gave a rare smile, not mocking but enigmatic. If you want it. He slid the glass toward her, his gaze never leaving hers. But be careful, it's stronger than it looks. She took the glass and sipped. The wine was rich and bold, burning its way down her throat. Is this what you always do? She asked softly. Sit alone, drink wine, and think about the past? Lucian stared into the fire, silent for a while before answering. Not always, but some nights, the past refuses to let me be. He took another sip, then looked at her. What about you? What do you think about lying in that unfamiliar room? Scarlett gripped her glass tighter, her eyes on the flames. She wanted to lie, to keep her distance. But the wine, or maybe just his presence, made her let go. I think about my mother, she whispered. She died when I was 10. She was the only one who ever really understood me. After that, my father turned me into something else, a perfect doll, for display, for contracts, for marrying a man I don't love. Lucian listened without interruption. When she fell silent, he spoke, voice deep and low. You're more like your mother than you think. Isabel. She was like that too. She never let anyone decide her fate. Scarlett looked up, startled. You knew my mother? She asked, her voice shaking. He shook his head, but something unreadable passed through his eyes. Number. But I know people like you, people with hearts too big for the world to hold without crushing them. His words struck something deep inside her. Scarlett took another sip, feeling the warmth spread through her chest. And what about you? She asked, her voice bolder now. What kind of heart do you have, Lucian? A broken one? Or one that's already dead? He let out a dry chuckle, rough but not cruel. You're braver than I thought, Scarlett Donovan. He leaned forward and set his glass on the table. You want to know about my heart? It still beats, but it's learned not to feel. That's the only way it knows how to survive. Scarlett held his gaze, her voice trembling with emotion. That's not living, she said. That's existing. And I don't want that. Not for me, and not for you. The space between them thickened. Lucian looked at her. So long, so intensely, she felt like she might dissolve beneath his gaze. Then, as if something pulled him beyond his control, he reached for her hand. His touch was warm, strong, yet so gentle it was barely there. Scarlett felt her breath catch, her pulse stuttering. Lucien, she whispered, not even knowing what she meant to say. He didn't let her finish. He pulled her toward him, and before she could react, his lips met hers. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was fierce, hungry, as if they'd both held back too long. Scarlett felt the world vanish. Only his warmth remained, the taste of wine on his lips, the thunder of her own heartbeat. She responded, her hands finding his shoulders, clinging to him like she was afraid he'd disappear. The kiss deepened, pulling them into a whirlwind of emotion. But then, like lightning, reality struck. Scarlett broke away, breathless, panic in her eyes. No, she gasped, voice shaking. We can't. I can't. Lucian didn't move to stop her. His eyes still burned, but he let her go. What are you afraid of? He asked, voice rough. Me or yourself? Scarlett stood abruptly, the blanket slipping from her shoulders to the floor. Her heart felt torn in two. That kiss, it was more real than anything she'd ever experienced. And yet, it was dangerous. She didn't know who Lucian really was. She didn't know his past. And worse, she didn't know if she was strong enough to face what she felt. I have to go, she said, barely more than a whisper. The storm has passed. I can't stay here anymore. Lucian said nothing. He just looked at her, his expression a mix of pain and resolve. If you want to go, I won't stop you, he said quietly. But you know, Scarlett, running never solves anything. She turned and ran down the hall, slamming the bedroom door behind her. She collapsed onto the bed, covering her face, trying to hold back the tears. His kiss still burned on her lips, sweet, devastating. She knew he was right. She wasn't just running from her father or from James. She was running from herself. She looked toward the window where the first light of dawn broke through the snow. The road was clear. She could leave. But as she packed the few belongings she had, her heart felt unbearably heavy. Leaving meant leaving Lucian, leaving something she hadn't yet understood, but had already made her feel more alive than ever. Standing at the door, hand on the knob, she asked herself, do I really want to go? Or am I just trying to convince myself I should? After last night's kiss, Scarlett couldn't face Lucian. She avoided him, wandering through the mansion's cold hallways, trying to extinguish the fire still smoldering inside her. The snowstorm had passed. The road to the gate was now clear, but she remained, not because of the weather, but because part of her couldn't bring herself to leave him. She wasn't ready to walk away from the mystery of this house, and Lucian himself held tight. That morning, while Lucian was out checking the road, Scarlett found her way to the study, a room she hadn't explored before. The small space was lined with oak-paneled walls, filled with shelves of old books and the faint scent of aging paper. A soft light from the window fell across a wooden desk, where a carved wooden box lay quietly. Curious, she opened it. Inside was a bundle of letters, tied with a faded red ribbon. The envelopes were wrinkled, the handwriting strong yet elegant. Her breath caught when she saw the signature at the bottom of one letter. L.V. Lucian Vale. His name cut through her thoughts like a blade. With trembling hands, she opened the first letter. It was dated 10 years ago, addressed to her father, Edward Donovan. The content was brief but icy. Edward, I've held up my end of the deal. If you go back on your word, there won't be a second time. L.V. Scarlett felt the blood drain from her face. She read on, each letter a piece of a story she had never known. Lucian and her father had once been business partners, investing in a massive financial venture. A younger Lucian had poured everything he had into the deal, trusting her father's word. Then came the final letter, the handwriting shakier and the words like a dagger. Edward, you betrayed me. You took everything, my money, my name, my future. I swear no Donovan will ever set foot in my house again. L.V. Scarlett collapsed into the chair, clutching the letters as if they were explosives. Lucian didn't just know her father. He had been destroyed by him. This mansion, his reclusive life, all of it was fallout from that betrayal. But what hurt the most was the kiss. He kissed her, knowing she was the daughter of the man who ruined him. What did it mean? Revenge or a moment of weakness? She heard heavy footsteps in the hallway. Lucian entered, his coat still dusted with snow. His eyes darkened as they landed on the letters in her hands. You had no right to go through that, he said, his voice like ice. But she caught something else in his expression, a flicker of panic. No right? Scarlett stood, voice shaking with hurt and fury. You knew who I was from the beginning, didn't you? The daughter of Edward Donovan, the man who took everything from you. So why did you let me stay? Why did you... Her voice caught. Why did you kiss me? Lucian's jaw tightened, his hands curled into fists. You want the truth? He asked, stepping forward, forcing her to take a step back. I let you stay because I wanted to see Edward Donovan's daughter fall. I wanted to watch you break, like I did. His words landed like a punch. Scarlett's heart cracked, but she held his gaze. And the kiss? She asked, her voice low but sharp. Was that part of your revenge too? Lucian stopped just a few feet from her. He stared at her for what felt like an eternity before he finally spoke, his voice hoarse. No, that was my mistake. I didn't mean to feel anything for you. A wave of emotion crashed over her. Anger, grief, but also painful understanding. You say I'm the daughter of a traitor, she said, voice trembling. But I'm not my father, Lucian. I didn't know what he did to you, and I'm not here to pay for his sins. Lucian let out a bitter laugh, dry, almost hollow. You think that's enough? That you can walk into my life, stir up everything, and just leave like nothing ever happened? You don't understand, Scarlett. This house, this me, is all that was left after your father ruined me. Scarlett stepped toward him, despite the fear pulsing in her chest. Then tell me, she said, her voice steady. Tell me what happened. If you want me to understand, if you want me to leave, then give me the truth. Lucian's eyes flickered between anger and something far deeper. Pain. Finally, he turned away and leaned against the bookshelf. 10 years ago, he began, voice low, I was a young, ambitious investor. Your father and I partnered on a financial project. I trusted him, put everything I had into it. But he rigged the numbers, shifted the blame when it failed. He walked away with everything, my money, my reputation, my future. He paused, his voice breaking slightly. And Isabel, she couldn't take the pressure. She disappeared. I never found out if she was alive or dead. Scarlett stood frozen. She had always known her father was ruthless in business, but never imagined he had destroyed someone like this. I didn't know, she whispered, tears brimming. I'm sorry, Lucian, but you can't keep blaming me. I'm not him. Lucian turned back, eyes burning. You think I don't know that? He rasped. But every time I look at you, I see him, and I hate myself, because even knowing who you are, he stopped, voice cracking. I still wanted you to stay. Scarlett's heart thundered. Still what? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, torn. Still wanted you here, he said, so softly she had to strain to hear. But I can't. No Donovan is welcome here. A deep ache spread in her chest. She wanted to scream, to tell him she was fighting too, that their kiss wasn't a mistake. But instead she nodded, her voice cold. I understand. I'll leave. Right now. She turned and walked out of the study, leaving the bundle of letters on the desk. But as she climbed the stairs to pack, her heart felt unbearably heavy. She wasn't just leaving Lucian. She was leaving a part of herself, a part she had discovered in this mansion, in his eyes. And she knew no matter how far she ran, what happened here would haunt her forever. Scarlett stood in the cold living room, a small suitcase at her feet. Dawn's pale light filtering through the window. The letters from the study haunted her still, every word carved into her heart like a reminder that she wasn't just Scarlett Donovan. She was the daughter of the man who had destroyed Lucian's life. Their kiss, those fleeting, shared moments, now felt like the remnants of a shattered dream. She realized she had been nothing more than a pawn in a long, cruel game. Her father the player, and Lucian the final casualty. She heard slow footsteps descending the stairs. Lucian appeared, tall, broad-shouldered, but with eyes full of inner conflict. He stopped at the doorway, keeping a distance between them, as if afraid getting any closer might break him. You said you were leaving, he said, his voice deep, not as cold as before, but still guarded. The road's clear now. You don't have to stay. Scarlett clenched her fists, steadying her voice. Are you sending me away because I'm Edward Donovan's daughter? Or because you're afraid of something else? She asked, her gaze locked on his. She needed him to say it, that the kiss wasn't a mistake, that he had felt the fire between them too. Lucian stared back, eyes stormy with things unsaid. You want the truth? He said, voice hoarse. I don't hate you, Scarlett. I want to hate you. I want to blame you for everything your father did. But I can't. And that's why you have to go. Because if you stay, I'll... He stopped, turning away as if the rest was too painful to speak aloud. You'll what? Scarlett stepped closer, her voice trembling. You'll fall in love with me? You'll let yourself be happy? Why are you punishing yourself, Lucian? My father took your past, but you're letting him steal your future too. Lucian let out a dry, bitter laugh. Happy? He echoed, as if the word were foreign. You don't understand, Scarlett. I don't deserve happiness. Not after everything I've lost. Not after what I failed to save. Isabel disappeared because I wasn't strong enough to protect her. And you, his eyes found hers filled with pain. You deserve someone better than me. Not a man who's just pieces of what he used to be. Scarlett's heart ached as if it were being torn in two. She wanted to scream, to tell him she didn't need perfect. She only needed him, his truth, his scars, his brokenness. But she knew he had built a wall too tall for her to break through. Not now, maybe not ever. You're wrong, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I'm not a pawn in my father's game, and I'm not Isabel. But if you want to push me away, if you want to keep living with your ghosts, then I'll go. Not because I'm weak, but because I respect your choice. She picked up her suitcase and walked toward the door. Each step felt like carrying the weight of 1,000 pounds, like she was leaving behind a piece of her heart within these walls. Lucian didn't stop her, but she felt his eyes on her. A silent goodbye he couldn't bring himself to speak. When she opened the door, the cold wind swept in, bringing with it the scent of snow and loneliness. She turned one last time to look at him. I hope one day, she said quietly, you'll forgive yourself. Then she stepped out. The snow-covered path led her back to the rental car, now cleared and waiting. Scarlett drove away from the mansion without looking back, but tears slipped silently down her cheeks. She wasn't crying because she had been rejected, but because she now understood she had been the final link in a chain of tragedy between her father, Lucian, and Isabel. She had fled New York in search of freedom, but found something far more painful, in a man she couldn't stop thinking about. The drive back to the city was long and dull. When the skyline of New York finally emerged, she felt like a stranger returning to a world that no longer fit. She was no longer the obedient Donovan heiress. Lucian's kiss, the days inside that mansion, had changed her. She was stronger now, but her heart was also more fragile than ever. She stopped the car outside the Plaza Hotel, where everything had begun. Her phone buzzed. Dozens of messages from her father and James. But she didn't open them. She walked into the lobby, the glittering chandeliers above reminding her of the golden cage she had once called life. A staff member recognized her, whispered something to a colleague, but Scarlett didn't care. She went straight to the front desk and booked a room, for the first time in her life, using her own credit card, not her father's. In the hotel room, Scarlett sat by the window, staring at the city lights below. She thought of Lucian, how he hadn't pushed her away out of hate, but out of fear. Fear of loving again, fear of losing again. She thought of Isabel, of the letters, of her father. She realized she hadn't just run from a wedding. She had run from a legacy of pain, but not anymore. She picked up her phone and typed a short message to her father. "I'm back, but things will be different. We need to talk." She hit send and turned the phone off. She didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but she knew one thing for sure. She would never be a pawn again. Lucian might choose to live in the past, but she would choose the future, no matter how painful. And as she closed her eyes, his image appeared, his stormy eyes, his searing kiss, and the rasp in his voice when he confessed he wanted her to stay. She didn't know if they would ever meet again, but one thing was certain. He had changed her, forever. With a broken but unyielding heart, Scarlett took a deep breath, ready for whatever waited beyond the next sunrise. Are you still following the story? Please leave your thoughts on the story in the comments below. All your comments are the motivation for us to create better stories. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Thank you very much. New York welcomed Scarlett with blinding lights and the blare of traffic, but she felt like a stranger in the city she once called home. When she stepped into the Donovan family penthouse, the scent of expensive perfume and the sterile glow of glass walls made it hard to breathe. Her father, Edward Donovan, stood in the living room, his gaze sharp as steel. "Where have you been?" he asked, his voice low but heavy with authority. "Do you have any idea how much disgrace you've brought upon this family?" Scarlett stood tall, no longer bowing her head like she once would. "I needed time to think," she said calmly, firmly, "and I've thought it through." She said nothing about Lucian, nothing about the letters or the mansion in Maine, but inside her she carried both the pain and the strength those days had given her. Edward stepped closer, scrutinizing her like she was a chess piece he couldn't control. "Think?" he sneered. "You're the heir to the Donovan legacy, Scarlett. You don't get to think. You have a duty." He pointed to a newspaper on the table, its headline screaming, "Donovan Heiress flees engagement. Scandal or secret?" "The media is tearing us apart. James has agreed to forgive the incident, but you will attend the press conference this afternoon and confirm the engagement." Scarlett glanced at the paper, then back at her father. She remembered Lucian, how he spoke of her father's betrayal, how he had been destroyed. But more than that, she remembered herself, the woman who had dared to run, to love, and to face the truth. "I'll go to the press conference," she said, voice calm and even. "But I won't say what you want me to." Edward's brow furrowed, but before he could respond, his phone rang. He turned away, leaving Scarlett standing in the silence of her defiance. She knew the real battle was still ahead. That afternoon, the Plaza Hotel once again became a media spectacle. Dozens of reporters, cameras, and flashing lights filled the room as Scarlett stepped into the conference. James stood beside her, his smile flawless but cold, like a portrait designed to please the public. Her father stood behind her, eyes commanding her to stay quiet and smile. But Scarlett was no longer the obedient daughter she had been a week ago. She had changed, and today she would prove it. When the microphone was passed to her, Scarlett took a deep breath. She looked out at the sea of faces, hungry for scandal. "I know you're all waiting for an explanation," she began, voice clear and steady. "I left the engagement party because I don't love James. I refuse to live a life that's been arranged for me, where my happiness is sacrificed for reputation or money." A murmur rippled through the room. James stiffened, his smile faltering. Edward stepped forward, trying to grasp her hand, but Scarlett pulled away, her gaze unwavering. "Scarlett," he hissed under his breath, a warning. "Don't be foolish." But she didn't stop. She thought of Lucian, of the scars her father left on him. She thought of her mother, who once said freedom is worth more than any diamond, and she thought of the girl who had walked into a strange mansion and found her strength there. "I'm not just refusing this marriage," she said, her voice rising into the silence. "I'm refusing to live by anyone else's script. The Donovan name may stand for power, but I am not a possession. I am Scarlett, and I choose to live as myself." The room exploded. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed wildly. James turned away, his face red with fury. Edward's fists clenched, his eyes blazing. But Scarlett wasn't afraid. For the first time in her life, she felt free. Not the freedom of running, but the freedom of standing in her truth. After the press conference, Scarlett walked out of the hotel, leaving her father and James behind to deal with the media storm. She walked through the streets of New York, neon lights reflecting on the rain-slicked pavement. Her phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends, her father's lawyers, strangers. But she didn't care. She had shattered the golden cage, and no matter how uncertain the future felt, she knew she would never go back. She stopped in front of a small cafe, its warm golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. She stepped inside, ordered a cup of hot tea, and sat by the window. As the warmth seeped into her hands, she thought of Lucian. She wondered what he was doing, if he still sat by the fireplace, clinging to memories of Isabel, or if he had finally found some light in his darkness. She didn't regret leaving, but she did regret not telling him that she loved him, not for being a hero or a villain, but for simply being Lucian, with all his wounds and quiet strength. Scarlett pulled a piece of paper from her coat and scribbled a few simple lines. "Lucian, I stood up for myself today. I hope one day you'll do the same. Thank you for showing me I'm stronger than I thought." She folded the paper and slipped it into her purse, not to send, but to keep. A reminder, because even if she never saw him again, he had become part of her, not a scar, but a flame that reminded her she could survive any storm. She took a sip of tea, staring out at the crowded street. New York wasn't a prison anymore. It was a door to a future she would write for herself. And though her heart still ached when she thought of Lucian, she smiled because she knew she had chosen right. Not just for today, but for the life ahead. 2 weeks after the explosive press conference, Scarlett Donovan stood in the middle of her new apartment in Brooklyn, a small but warm space that was entirely her own. Unopened boxes lay scattered across the floor, signs of a new life just beginning. She had cut ties with her father, refused every cent from the Donovan estate, and started working at a nonprofit. Humble work, but it made her feel alive. And yet, even with freedom in her hands, her heart remained heavy every time she thought of Lucian Vale. Every night she dreamed of the mansion in Maine, of his deep, haunted eyes, the fierce kiss they shared, and the rasp in his voice when he admitted he wanted her to stay. She wondered where he was now, whether he was still living with Isabel's ghosts, or if he had found some sliver of light. She didn't regret leaving, but she did regret not telling him that she loved him. Not because he had saved her, but because he had helped her see herself. That morning, a small package arrived at her apartment. No return address. Scarlett's heart raced as she opened it and found an old envelope, the handwriting strong and elegant. Lucian. Inside was a letter and a small key engraved with the image of a piano. With trembling hands, she unfolded the letter. Every word cut into her like a sweet, aching blade. "Scarlett, by the time you read this, I will have sold the mansion and left Maine. I don't know where I'm going, only that I can't stay in that place anymore, where every corner reminds me of Isabel, and now of you. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I'm writing to say the things I didn't have the courage to say when you were still here. I was wrong to push you away. I said it was because you were Edward Donovan's daughter, but the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid that if I let myself love you, I'd lose you, like I lost Isabel. You were right. I live among ghosts, and I've let them drag me down. But you, Scarlett, you were the light I never expected. You made me want to live again, if only for a few fleeting moments. That kiss wasn't a mistake. It was the realest thing I've felt since Isabel disappeared. I love you, Scarlett, but I don't deserve you. You are fire, and I am ash. I let you go because I wanted you to have the life you deserve, a life I didn't think I could give you. This key belongs to the piano. I left it behind with the new owners, but I wanted you to have the key as a reminder that music and your heart can open doors I never dared to touch. Thank you for walking into my life, even if it was only during a storm. Lucian. Scarlett clutched the letter to her chest, tears falling silently. The pain was sharp, but so was the release. He loved her. She had suspected but never dared to fully believe it. And now he was gone, leaving her with a key and words that felt like a quiet, final goodbye. She thought of those days in the mansion, the way he had looked at her as she played Claire de Lune, the way his hand had found hers before that kiss. He wasn't Ash. He was a man with a broken heart, but one still strong enough to love, even if he didn't believe he was worthy. She rose to her feet, wiped her tears, and held the small key in her hand. It was tiny, but it held weight. Lucian may have believed he didn't deserve her, but she didn't believe that. She had fled New York to find freedom, and now she would run toward him, not to save him, but to show him that both of them were worthy of love. She called a friend in real estate, asking for help tracking the sale of the mansion in Maine. A few hours later, she had an answer. The estate had been sold. The broker didn't have an exact address, but said Lucian had traveled to a small coastal town not far from Portland, a place called Haven's End. Scarlett didn't hesitate. She packed a small bag, slipped the piano key into her coat pocket, and booked a bus ticket to Maine. This time she wasn't running away. She was running toward what she wanted, for the sake of her own heart. On the bus, Scarlett gazed out the window as the landscape blurred beneath the sunset. She thought of her mother, who once said love is the only thing worth fighting for. She thought of Lucian, how he had turned away from happiness because he feared losing it. She wouldn't let him do that again. She would find him, even if she had to knock on every door in Haven's End. And when she did, she would tell him she loved him, not because he needed to hear it, but because she needed to say it. She held the key tightly, feeling the intricate carvings under her fingers. It wasn't just the key to a piano, it was the key to a door they had both closed, a door to a future where they could heal together. Scarlett smiled, painful but hopeful. She didn't know what waited in Haven's End, but she knew one thing. She wouldn't turn back. Not now. Not ever. She would no longer live a half-life. As the bus rolled through the snow-covered roads, she closed her eyes and saw Lucian's face, those deep, dark eyes, that rare, aching smile, and the rasp of his voice when he said her name. She didn't know if she would find him, but she knew she wouldn't stop, not for him, but for herself, for the love she had found, and would never let go. Haven's End, a small coastal town in Maine, where waves lapped gently at rocky shores and weathered wooden homes stood silent beneath the autumn sky. Scarlett stepped off the bus, her breath curling in the cold air, her hand wrapped tightly around the piano key, Lucian's final gift. She had no address, no real lead, only a name and the unshakable belief that she would find him. She walked along cobblestone streets, asking around at the cafe, the general store, the harbor. An old boat repairman looked up at her and smiled. "You looking for the guy who just moved in down by the far end of the beach?" he asked. "He's been working on boats at the docks lately." Scarlett nodded, heart pounding, with a mix of hope and fear. The old man pointed the way and she followed, boots crunching over gravel, until she reached a small wooden cabin, smoke curling softly from the chimney. She knocked. Her heart thudded wildly. Lucian opened the door, tall, tousled dark hair, and those stormy eyes wide in disbelief. He wore a gray sweater, still carrying that rugged magnetic aura. "Scarlett?" His voice was hoarse, like he didn't believe what he was seeing. What are you doing here?" Scarlett smiled even though her whole body trembled. "I read your letter," she said gently but firmly. "I'm not here to apologize or argue. I'm here because there's something you need to know." Lucian stepped back, holding the door open, his eyes wary. "The truth?" he said quietly. "You already did enough, Scarlett. You stood up for yourself, just like you said you would. Why come back?" She stepped inside. The cabin smelled of burning wood and sea salt, A modest wooden table, a few books, a window overlooking the surf. She turned to face him. "Because I love you," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "Not because I need you to save me, or because I want to fix you. I love you, Lucian, with all your scars and all your pain. And I can't let you keep running from me like you're running from yourself." Lucian stood frozen, his eyes flickering between ache and longing. "You don't understand," he whispered. "I'm not who you think I am. I let Isabel go. I let the past destroy me. I can't give you a palace. I can't give you the life you deserve." Scarlett stepped closer, now only a few feet from him. "I don't want a palace," she said, voice steady. "I lived in one my whole life, and it was just a cage. I choose the ashes, Lucian. If you're in them, then that's where I want to be." Her words shattered the last of his walls. Lucian looked at her, his eyes burning, and whispered, "Scarlett," like her name was a prayer. But before he could say more, she moved. She placed her hand over his heart, feeling it race beneath her palm. Then she rose on her toes, pulled him down, and kissed him. It was deep and fierce, a kiss full of promises and broken pieces finally fitting together. Lucian wrapped his arms around her, holding her like he was afraid she'd disappear. They kissed there in the cabin, with the waves crashing beyond the window, as if the world had narrowed down to only the two of them. When they finally broke apart, Lucian rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I don't deserve you," he whispered, voice raw. "But I love you, Scarlett. I've loved you since the first time you played Claire de Lune. I was too afraid to admit it, afraid I'd hurt you." Scarlett smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "You can't hurt me more than I've already hurt myself," she said. "But we can heal, together. Not because we're perfect, but because we choose each other." He opened his eyes, looking at her with a tenderness she had never seen in him before. "Are you sure?" he asked. "This life, this cabin, this town, it's not New York. No lights, no spotlight." She took his hand and laughed softly. "I never wanted the lights. I want you. And I want us to write a new song. Not Claire de Lune, but one that's ours." Lucian laughed, a warm, free sound, and pulled her into his arms. "A new song," he repeated. "I can't promise it'll be perfect, but I promise I'll try. For you." 1 year later, the cabin in Haven's End was now filled with light and music. A small piano sat in the corner, a gift from Scarlett to Lucian. Every evening they played together. Simple melodies, sometimes clumsy, but full of love. They didn't erase the past. Isabel was still part of Lucian, just as Scarlett's mother was part of her. But they learned to live with the memories, no longer prisoners of them. Scarlett worked remotely for the nonprofit, bringing hope to those who needed it most. But Lucian, he had rediscovered his old fire. After months in Haven's End, he started a small business, not with the reckless ambition of youth, but with quiet purpose. He partnered with local fishermen, building a sustainable seafood brand. It wasn't a $1 million empire, but it was his, a way to rebuild faith in himself, a way to prove he wasn't just ashes. Scarlett watched him with pride, from mornings spent calculating at the kitchen table to evenings when he returned home smelling of salt and wind, smiling with joy. "This is who you are," she once told him, when he worried his business wasn't big enough. "Not because of its size, but because you built it with your heart." Today they stood hand in hand on the beach, watching the sun set in flames across the sea. Lucian turned to her, his eyes soft. "You know," he said, voice low, "I used to think I'd never get back up after what your father did. But you made me want to try again. You made me want to really live." Scarlett rose on her toes and kissed him gently. "You didn't get back up for me," she whispered. "You did it for yourself. And that's why I love you." He smiled, pulling her close, waves lapping at their feet. "My girl," he murmured, "do you ever regret choosing this pile of ashes?" She shook her head, smiling through tears. "Never, because this pile of ashes is my home." They built a life from ruins, a wooden cabin, a small business, a shared piano melody. Some nights they sat by the fire, sharing dreams and fears. Some mornings they argued over nothing, then made up with a kiss. Lucian no longer hid in the dark. Scarlett no longer ran from herself. They healed each other, not through grand gestures, but through quiet moments. A held hand, a song shared, a day's work side by side. Under the sky of Haven's End, they wrote a new future. No palaces, no titles, just real love. And a Lucian who had finally found himself, not to prove anything to the world, but to prove quietly, powerfully to his own heart that he was worthy of joy.